I have complicated thoughts about him, actually, as just a historic figure. I think if I were to be entirely objective, or try and be objective in a subjective field, I would say not that great a president. Started off with a military disaster, then upped the ante with the Soviets in Turkey, and then refused to back down, nearly bringing about the end of the world. A very Obama-like stance on civil rights, very reluctant to get too involved too quickly. Obviously started, and some believe would have ended, but I don't, the Vietnam War. And also a very strong Cold Warrior who gave a great deal of clout to the notion that the United States should be involved everywhere across the world, intervening if any injustice or lack of fairness or lack of democracy exists. We somehow should pay any price, bear any burden, to quote him directly, to resolve this, which I think is a kind of crazy utopianism that was a clear attempt to position himself to the right, as it were, of the Eisenhower era, and probably legitimized and was a forerunner of neoconservatism. I sometimes think that George W. Bush and John F. Kennedy are much closer than either conservatives or liberals want to admit. Both were sort of scions of political families. They were the offspring, supposed to realize the legacy of their forefathers. They were both kind of lazy aristocrats, not that interested in school, although Kennedy, I think, shows much higher signs of intelligence and curiosity than Bush did. And then went on in office to launch grand crusades. In both cases, I think, somewhat disastrously, except, of course, Kennedy did manage to de-escalate and help de-escalate the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that, I do think, is important. I do think it's important that he did in those moments, and it's worth celebrating, commemorating his sense of sanity and judgment in those days, for which he deserves great credit. But otherwise, he revolutionized the presidency in terms of image. He gave great hope and branding to America across the world. But substantively, I think we see him through the eyes and the prism of the assassination, and we do not yet have the clarity to see him quite clearly outside of that particular telescope.